Let's talk about magical items and how to make them awesome again. If you're running a, let's say, typical game of D&D or 5e, most likely by level 5, maybe by level 10, your players will have so many magical items that they will have to decide if they are sticking with their longsword +2 or if they are rather go for their battle axe +3 or something. And while they will appreciate getting more magical items, there's a diminishing return. They are becoming common loot. Just another item, another piece of equipment to replace as you find better stuff. Worst example of this would be a hack and slay like Diablo, where you find magical items that then are replaced by rare items, that then are replaced by unique items, and you have to do that like every 10 levels or so. If you're running it like this, magical items are just nothing special. They become mundane. But magic items should be so much more interesting. We've got these great mystical treasures from legend and story. Everyone remembers Excalibur, the sword of the king, not the +3 sword that is slightly better than the +2 swords that the knights had. Or the one ring of power. Now those are legendary magical items. And why is that? Well, first, they are rare. There's only one Excalibur. There's only one ring of power. Well, there's supposed to be like 15 or so, but there's only one that is important in the plot and that one of the main characters has in his possession. So if they are rare, they are special. More often than not, these mystical items are what a huge portion of the plot revolves around. The whole Lord of the Rings revolves around the whole ring. You cannot imagine a King Arthur story without the Excalibur. So they are very important for the plot. And they are not even necessarily powerful. I mean, a ring that makes you invisible, that's pretty good. A magical sword that can cleave through other swords, pretty good. But it all depends on the power level around those magical items. If you're playing a high fantasy, high power game, maybe even Eberron, where magic is commonplace, many even magical items will become very mundane. So to have a legendary item, it needs to be very powerful. You can somewhat mitigate the mystical power of these items by giving them some kind of drawback, some kind of cost that is involved when using them, some kind of enemy that is drawing nearer, some kind of curse. I personally love cursed magical items. Or they have powers that are very situational, that can change the course of a whole adventure, but only if applied properly. And if you are playing in a high fantasy, high magic world, I would suggest you try to make these magic items you want to stand out very unique. They don't have just a +1, +2 to attack and damage, or do a bit of fire damage on top or something, or allow you to cast a few spells each day. No. These have to allow your PCs to do something that is not in the rules. These magic items need to be so powerful they are rule-breaking and potentially world and game-breaking. But if you're playing in such a powerful high fantasy world, nothing else will stand out against all the other items. As you can see, it's way easier to have legendary magical items in a low fantasy world. Imagine you're playing in a Bronze Age or even a Stone Age world. A simple steel sword that does not bend or break and stays sharp for long would be considered an Excalibur in that world. Sort of note and legend, able to cut through other weapons. Weapon of undefeated champions and kings. So I would suggest having way fewer magical items in general, so that through the course of your campaign, maybe the group finds a few minor magical trinkets. Maybe so each PC has one or two of them, but major legendary magical items, one, maybe two for the entire group and for the entire campaign. These are the items that you should involve your plot around. And if your PCs are carrying these items, then the world around them should take note. You're no longer just Tharkon the Barbarian. You're the legendary wielder of the Aegis shield, the foe breaker. Kings and warlords will seek to either make you their ally or to assassinate you in your sleep. And final point. You should get rid of the Identify spell. Maybe keep the Identify spell if you're in a high magical world and magic items are 1 dozen. But then don't let the Identify spell work on your legendary items. The characters should be forced to go on a quest, seek out a sage on a mountain or something. Go into a dungeon delve, go into a lost library to find out what this magical item is all about. Sure, they can find some of the powers through trial and error, but as I like cursed items, this can be rather dangerous. Fun, but dangerous. Once they have delved into the lost caverns to find the legendary stone library of Aratmurn, then the players will appreciate the powers they now know about and can wield in a semi-safe faction way more than if they just found the item in a chest in a dungeon, cast an Identify spell and were good to go. In Nock issue 2 there was this great idea of revealing the powers of a magical item as the characters find out more about it. This way, some random sword, some random bronze sword they find at the beginning of the campaign in the tomb of a king apparently, can grow over time as the characters level up and stay relevant throughout the entire game. And then when they find out that these swords were used in the ancient empire of Tandalia by the best warriors they had, the elite paladins, then it becomes a +2 sword. Or maybe some other interesting, give it a more interesting magical effect than +2. But that's the general idea, that it becomes more powerful as you get to know more about it. Then finally, when they find out that it is the sword of the Blood Prince himself, it becomes a super mighty Vorpal blade or something. I made a magical item as an example just now. It's called Duranganark's Bloodshot Warbow. It is a powerful warbow made from the long curved horns of some creature. The string is a wire, so thin it easily cuts into flesh. It cannot be unstrung, but the bow does not seem to suffer from being strung all the time. I've got several paragraphs that reveal more of the bow when you find out the legend and when you experiment with it rather than casting Identify. When you first find it, you will need special gloves not to cut yourself when using it, thick leather or spider silk. The bow emits a magical aura and is very resilient. The string cuts easily. Can be used as a cheese cutter or melee weapon dealing 1d8 slicing damage. Counts as magical. So that's not super powerful, but it certainly is useful. And I think a creative player will be able to find some exploit for that. And when you cut yourself on the string, which will probably happen at some point if you're using this bow or if you're handling it and are not careful, so sooner than later. So you cut yourself on the string, you can draw a line of blood from the wound that crystallizes into an arrow. Each arrow made this way counts as a +1 magical arrow. Making an arrow does 1d4 HP damage to yourself. So still not incredibly powerful, but very useful. In case you run out of normal arrows or in case you need magical arrows to wound some beast with resistance to normal damage. Then it gets interesting. When you use someone else's blood to make an arrow, which players will probably try at some point, the arrow thus made will never miss its target, one whose blood was spilled to make it. But as the arrow strikes, the wound is mirrored on the shooter. You can make an arrow that never misses, but you will get the same damage as the target. But creative players should be able to find a use for it. Maybe if you're tracking some creature and you manage to wound it, you can pick up some of the blood from the trail and then shoot the arrow high in the sky and see in which direction it goes, enable you to track that creature. Or you can poison the arrow. The wound is mirrored. Doesn't say that it mirrors the poison, so that could be a neat tool to assassinate a king, eh? Finally, when you find out the legend of Duranganark. Duranganark was a half-orc hunter who lived in the Razorwind steppes before the Great Calamity. A band of pillaging beastmen, led by the great warlord Sursabu, attacked Duranganark's village one day while he was hunting. Swearing bloody revenge, he carved a warbow out of the corpses of the beastmen he had slain, stringing it with the silk from giant Razorwind spiders. He set out to take his revenge. Eventually, he found the warlord and began shooting bloody arrows at him. Finally, with his last shot, he felled the man, but he had lost so much blood in the attempt that he fell over dead. A bit of background here, and maybe you can hear this legend passed down through generation of half-orc hunters. Maybe you find the grave of this warlord that Duranganark has slain. Maybe you will meet the ghost of the man himself at some point. And once you find this out, this bow is now a +1 magical weapon. So not super powerful, not super special, certainly useful. The other abilities are certainly more interesting than this bonus. This is icing on the cake, which means a bonus of +2 if you're using blood arrows. I'll leave a link to this item in the video description. So, what's the best magical item, or rather, the most memorable magical item you ever found or gave out to your players? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching and goodbye.